I do have 11 o'clock my time, which is noon your time. So thank you everyone for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started on bridging the data analysis gap. My name is Liz Moya and I'll be your host. I do want to start off with a big shout out to those who are assisting me today, which is Ms. Beth Ponder and Dr. Olga Escamilla, who are assisting as moderators and with production during today's webinar. So thank you, ladies. Our presenter for today is none other than Ms. Elena Madrid. Ms. Elena Madrid currently serves as a program specialist with the Department of Adult Education and Literacy at the Texas Workforce Commission in Austin, Texas. She has an extensive background in the field of education with over 17 years of combined experience as an assistant director for student leadership and campus life, and as a recruiter for the El Paso Community College. She contributed to the development and facilitation of the first annual El Paso Community College Student Leadership Conference and regularly takes the opportunity to speak to groups on the topics of empowerment, education, and success strategies. Ms. Madrid also serves as a literacy coordinator for the Isleta del Sur Pueblo in El Paso, Texas. Ms. Madrid holds a master's degree in leadership studies from the University of Texas at El Paso and a bachelor's degree in journalism from New Mexico State University. Her experience as a first-generation college student drives her to make technology, information, and resources more accessible to others so that they can increase their opportunity for success. She further gives back to the community as a board member for the nonprofit Awaken Inner Fire, which shares a meditation practice to promote wellness and life balance. So at this time, it gives me great pleasure to present to you Ms. Elena Madrid. And Ms. Elena, I'm going to go ahead and pass the rights over to you. Okie dokie, and you now have control. You can go ahead and share your screen.
Thank you, Liz. The little option bar was there and now it disappeared. So I don't know if that had something to do with your sharing. Okay, there it is. Thank you. So let me go ahead and bring this up really quick. Okay, thank you for joining me today. I really, really appreciate you being here. I saw people signing in on the chat and I was so happy to see many people that I have worked with in the field over the last 5, almost 6 years with me being with the state in this capacity. For those of you I have not met that have signed on today, I hope to meet you in the future. I'm very, very fortunate to have met some really wonderful people out there. So as Liz said, I am a first-generation college student. Many of you may be able to connect with that. And my experience in high school was feeling that maybe sometimes some people received information and others didn't. And I feel like that was my experience when it came to college. So that really pushed me to want to be able to share more information and be in a capacity where I could do that. So I naturally am a sharer. I'm naturally someone who likes to try new things and find ways of doing things better. So I think it's been a good fit for me in the position that I work with right now and helping others with their success and their grants. So today we're going to talk about bridging the gap between data analysis and goal attainment. When we think about data analysis, I think many of you are already doing what we see here on the screen. So a lot of us are thinking about the mission or what we're trying to accomplish. You already know the data sources that could help you. So for example, the POP report, period of participation report. We have other information like the monthly performance report that's given out by our agency to the grant recipients. Some of you may be keeping other databases through Google Docs just to kind of have a checks and balances for the data you're collecting. You may also be organizing your data, analyzing your data, drawing conclusions and establishing goals and creating benchmarks. So at a minimum, this is what should be happening with your program, just kind of so that you have a foundation in moving towards where you want to go. If you're not establishing goals or creating benchmarks, but you have a vision, a lot of times it makes it very, very difficult to achieve those goals. So at a minimum, these things should be happening. But a lot of times we find ourselves stuck on one side of the bridge. We know where we want to go, but we don't necessarily know how to get there. And we aren't always conscientious of the things that may be in the way of us getting there. So in crossing the bridge, there are a number of things that we should be working on, working towards, be aware of, and they include communicating the data, being conscientious of how we're sharing information, ensuring that the people we're sharing the information with, that they understand what we're trying to communicate and how that relates to achieving the goal or crossing the bridge. Taking action. So many times we have the vision, we create the goals, but taking the action sometimes gets interrupted by everything that's already on our plate. So having a clear focus and ensuring that we have timelines and making sure that we stay on track is very important. The other thing is accountability. So as a manager, supervisor, director, we're often in charge of our team. So in charge in the respect that everybody's on the same page and everybody's doing what they're needing to do to contribute to the success. So sometimes we get so caught up with our own responsibilities, it's hard to even be concerned with what other people are doing. But the reality is when we're working as a team, we're on a team, everybody's actions will have some impact on the result. They'll have some impact maybe on, what we ourselves need to do. So I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you're waiting on a deliverable from someone else so you can move forward with what you need to do. Maybe it's a report, maybe it's entering the data, whatever it is. So having accountability is very important. Ways to measure your success and knowing that you are making improvement. So sometimes we might implement something new. We realize something's not working. So we say, let's try something new. But we don't even really know or check in to see if we're getting the results that we want until the year is already over. And maybe we're looking at targets or we're looking at, how well did we meet in comparison to the target. So measuring success and making improvement should happen along the way. It shouldn't be at the end of the year. It should happen as you're going along. So those are some things that are very, very necessary in being able to have goal attainment. With goal attainment, it should be a positive improvement. So whatever you're working towards, is it going to be helping the program? Is it going to be making things better for everybody that has a role in this this focus? Is it going to be a benefit to the program or organization? So we need to look at those things too. And also, it takes group coordination and cooperation. So I think sometimes as individuals, we aren't always conscientious of how our actions affect other people. I think a lot of times we're definitely aware of when other people's actions affect us. But that's the thing about working in a group, becoming more conscientious of how everybody interacts together and how everybody's actions do impact the end result is very, very important. So the objectives today, there are only two, because we only have an hour together or less, is understand what may be hindering successfully utilizing data to improve performance. So we talked about a couple of those things, in crossing the bridge. And the other thing is go beyond understanding data. So from conceptualization to the actualization of meeting your goals. So again, a lot of times we're stuck on one end of the bridge. And we have these ideas of where we want to go. We know we need to get to the other side, but we're not really sure. Or maybe we know, but we don't necessarily know how to communicate it to our team so that we're moving along together. So we're going to talk about some of those things today. So objective one, understand what may be hindering successfully utilizing data to improve performance. So these are the components again: communication, time, accountability. We didn't mention the right person for the job, but we'll be talking about that, timelines, and ways to measure performance. Again, these are 6 basic things, fundamental things that you should be taking into consideration when you're building out your plan for success. If you don't have these in place, or if they're not in place in the right way, they could be hindering you from getting to the other side. I don't know if you all have ever seen that thing of how you plan life with a straight line and an arrow as to how life really is. It's all this squiggliness, like heading in all kinds of different directions. Well, that's usually what happens when you don't have a clear plan. And that's definitely what happens when people aren't on the same page as far as communication. You should have received this throughout our conversation today, or my presentation. It's not really a conversation, but my presentation today. I would like for you to take the opportunity to reflect on each of these areas. You may not be able to do it while we're going through this today, but I hope that you'll be able to take the time to sit down and really think about what is going on with each of these areas in your organization, and maybe even for yourself. So there's a quote on there, I think it's really great. It says, "The greatest of faults is to be conscientious of none." So in thinking about that, it's about self-reflection. It's about, how do I contribute to the success or failure of my team, of what's happening at work, what's happening in my life, what's happening, in any situation that I'm a part of. So we're going to be looking at communication, time management, the person handling data analysis, the timeline accountability, how performance is being measured. And each section, there's a question or a couple of questions. The first being, what is the current state? So what is the current state of the communication that's happening in your organization? What is the current state of how you communicate? So that's a great evaluation. Are you an effective communicator? The other thing is, how can it be improved? Everything can always be improved. Everything can always be made better. So I'm asking that you take some time to reflect upon that. And the final thing is, what do we stand to gain from change? Or even for yourself, what do I stand to gain from change? And the opposite of that is, what if change doesn't happen? What will the results be for each of these areas? So let's start with communication. And I put here on the slide, one way is never the best way. And I'll give you more information on that as we move into it. But again, there's the questions. What is the current state? How can it be improved? What do we stand to gain from change?
And Elena, I'm going to interrupt you here because there's a question from Joni Hill. And the question says, could this reflection exercise be shared or adapted to share with students?
Yes, most definitely. Self-reflection, I think, is something that we have to learn. I don't think it's necessarily taught as we're growing up, and I think many of us struggle with communication because of that. So I think self-reflection in any capacity is great. But yes, Johnny, definitely, if you can modify it, you're free to do that. Any other questions, Liz?
No, ma'am, not at this time. Thank you.
Okay, great. So let's talk about the disconnected communication. I say disconnection in communication equals disconnect in achieving performance. So here we have an example of one-way communication. And that last slide I just showed you, one-way communication is not necessarily the best form of communication. So thinking about one-way communication, what does that look like? Generally, it's email. Maybe it's, attending a conference and you're just listening to a presenter. Maybe it's that memo that you missed out on, that one-way communication. So I title it level 1 communication. And with level 1 communication, what we see is it being one way. It's a lot of times not uniform. So what do I mean by that? What we often see is in the middle, we have the hub or the organization, the person, whatever you want it to be, the receiver of the information, the holder of the information, and they're responsible for sending it out to, whether it be other sites, whether it be to instructors, whether it be to, other staff members, whatever it is. So the holder of the communication, sometimes when they send out and share information, it's not uniform in the respect where maybe receivers of the information may get more information than other receivers of information. Maybe they're getting it more frequently than other receivers of information. For whatever the reason is, it's just not uniform. The other thing is no feedback or accountability. It's really, really hard to hold people accountable for things you're not even sure if you know that they know. So for an example, you send out an email and you just assume that they know. So there's expectation they're going to do something with that information, whatever you're wanting them to accomplish. Well, maybe the receiver didn't fully understand the communication, but there is something in the communication where the receiver feels like they can't maybe approach the person that sent the information. So there's no feedback, there can't be any accountability really, because you don't know if that person truly understood the information or they're really aware of what they're supposed to achieve. So again, it's hard to have that when it's just one-way communication. So let's talk about what this might look like in an organization. And I know many of you have seen this example, but I really love this example. So let's pretend that all these individuals got that email and they were told, you need a paddle, right? But maybe a couple of details were left out, like in what direction, or, you know, how soon do we need to get there? Or who needs to actually be paddling? So I don't know if this has ever happened in your organization where some people are paddling and paddling well, but maybe paddling in opposite directions. Or you have the couple in the middle that are, you know, saying, well, we're going to paddle when we get more information. So this is what happens in the disconnect, and people you don't know if they're really understanding what you're trying to communicate, because they end up doing different things. And it's not necessarily the wrong thing, it's just the way they understood it. So let's talk about communication reciprocated. Here we have team beginning to pull together to meet performance. So in the other image that you saw, everyone was kind of out there, they were kind of away from the main hub. Now you see people, sites, partners, whatever you want to call it, starting to pull into the core, and communication is starting to be reciprocated. So level 2 communication, we have communication that is reciprocated. Accountability can be more easily implemented. So this is still not the best form of communication, but you're getting closer to being able to achieve a goal together, because you're pulling in, you're starting to work together. You're starting to understand whether, you know, who you're communicating with actually understood what you were trying to say, and vice versa. You know, they can say, well, was this what you were trying to say? And trust can start to develop. So I can't say enough about trust and why that's so important. If you do not trust that who is leading you really has your best interest at heart, and they are looking to help you to succeed or helping the team to succeed, it's very difficult to trust that individual. And why that is not so good for the person that's communicating or the leader when that happens, it's hard to have your team working together, and it's hard to achieve things together. And everybody knows that we cannot achieve anything by ourselves, especially in this AEL and how crazy it is sometimes, and we change things, you know, at least once a summer. You know, it's really important that your team is working together and you're on the same page with things. So let's talk about that. I want you all to think about every time you've been in a plane. Maybe some of you have never flown, but for those of you who have, so you're a passenger on the plane, and you just know the pilot's going to get you where you are supposed to go. Why? Because you paid for that ticket. 2, because they have the expertise. But we don't get to see what's on the back end. We don't get to see the pilot communicating with the team in the tower that is helping them to navigate and get the passenger safely to the destination. So I want you all to think about how you may be leaders yourselves or pilots of your own airplanes, and the passengers are maybe your students, right? Or maybe the passengers are your staff on your team, and they're relying on you to navigate, and they're relying on you to give them direction in, you know, where you're supposed to be going. You want to help your people to navigate their paths and reach their destination. And success many times is going to be in the communication. So I just want you to remember that, you know, how important it is that whoever's leading is communicating effectively and, you know, helping people to navigate those blind spots, and that pilot or whoever is taking your direction can have faith and trust that you are going to lead them where they need to go. So let's talk about communication reciprocated and shared. So here the visual's a little bit different. We not only have, you know, whoever's receiving the information reciprocating communication, but communication is being shared between the sites, between the partners, between the instructors. So the team is starting to work synergistically to meet performance. So in level 3 communication, communication is reciprocated and shared amongst partners. Sites and partners work to help each other, and accountability is shared. So this dynamic is so much different than a team just working together. It is people are now coming together. They're wanting to help each other. They're wanting to empower each other. They want to be empowered. And the holder of the information is doing that. They're working to empower their team because they know that as their team is growing, as their team is stronger and they're more knowledgeable, they're going to be more of an asset to accomplishing what needs to be accomplished. So empower your people to succeed. Do not set them up for failure. And a lot of times when we withhold information or we give them limited information, we end up setting them up for failure. So we need to keep that in mind. When we help people to succeed, they want to help each other to succeed. So let's talk about communication for a second and how that happens. So generally, from the state level, we share an NPR report, and that goes out to the providers. And this may or may not be shared down the line. The state doesn't know exactly how this information is shared once we share it with the grant recipients. It may be shared with other team members. Generally, what will be shared will be something from team. So some kind of report, the POP report. I know people who have still been using reports that shouldn't still be used. Some of them are not in alignment with the changes that have been made about 2 years ago. So we really encourage using the POP report. We just sent out the MSG report, but there are still some things being worked out, but definitely be using the POP report. So this is how information might be shared. Now, when I talk about effective, transparent, clear, and easy communication, this is an example of maybe the way communication could be shared. And you may have a better impact of what you're trying to accomplish. So in this example, the data from the POP report was put in a form that's easily to understand. It's easy to understand. So the red line will represent the participants, and the blue line is the target. Anyone that sees this shouldn't have a difficult time understanding that, hey, we kind of flatlined for a couple months and we started moving up again in January by not much. But if we look at our target of 65 for the end of the year, I don't think we're on track. So, it makes for better communication, and it helps people to understand where they've been, where they're at, and where they need to be. Your POP report isn't going to do that. So the POP report will give you a snapshot of what performance is for when you pull that information. It's not going to give you a trajectory of how you've been doing in the past, and it's not going to necessarily show you, where you need to be month to month. So I just want to take a second before we go into the next section and ask if there's any questions. Liz, are you there?
Actually, this is Beth Ponder with Train PD. Liz is not here. She lost her internet connection, and so she's had to drop off the call. So Olga Escamilla and I are here to assist watching the chat. There are no questions at this moment, but we might give the participants just a moment to see if anybody has a question. So go ahead and reply to everyone in the chat if you have a question.
Okay, if there's no questions, we're just going to keep moving forward because I see that we're already, at 12:32, and we have a couple of slides to get through. So let's talk about time, the next area. So make good use of your time. It goes fast. So how do we create more time? Well, you can't, but you can create better efficiencies. So if you're not good at managing your time, it makes it really difficult to help others manage their time. And being a leader, being a supervisor, being a director, it's very important that you're able to do that, or you have someone assisting you do that. I know a lot of directors have assistants that, help them with their calendar and all that thing. But if you're in the boat like I am, and you got to manage your own time, and you have 100 and different things to take care of, you better learn how to create efficiencies. So let's talk about efficiencies. So in relation to data, you want to know how much time you're going to need to pull data. So that can vary. But if you have a system in place, you should already know that once every month, I need to pull this information that needs to be provided on a report that will be ready to communicate with whoever it may be, maybe your team, maybe it be leadership, and how much time is that going to be? So that should really be on your calendar. Also do it by site level, and you can also do it by classroom level. So that's really great. But the important thing is you have something that you can put it into. Because if you're just pulling information and you're going in there and you're going to say, well, I feel like pulling this today and that today, it can be very, you can get very frustrated, especially being in the POP report. So you should know what you're looking for and have somewhere to put it. So let's talk about having the right person for the job. Now, I don't know if you've thought about this, but sometimes we think that the data entry person has the same skill set to do data analysis. And that is not the case many times. So if you have a person doing data entry, be conscientious of what those duties actually are. It's getting, an enrollment form and putting into Teams, or getting a sign-in sheet and putting into Teams. Data analysis is totally different. You're looking at numbers, you're trying to interpret what's going on, you're trying to do root cause analysis, so much more. And the qualifications of the person of doing data analysis would be much different than someone doing data entry. So just be conscious of that. If you're a director or supervisor, and I've heard a lot of times, I just don't have time to analyze data. And I could understand that, but you need someone on your team that is going to do that for you. That way, you know where you need to make adjustments based on what's being reported in Teams. So timeline, also very important. This is just an example. You should have a timeline. You should know when you're pulling the data, when you're going to analyze the information, when you plan on sharing the information, what action you're expecting to happen from that sharing of the information, and then ensuring that that action takes place. So having a timeline definitely helps, because communicating to your team when and if you want something is very important. I know in El Paso, and I don't know, well, for me in El Paso, my experience is we say right now. Well, right now can mean a lot of things. Right now could be right now, literally, or right now could be later today, or, when I feel like I'm going to get to it. But that's not going to work in a team. You have to be very clear about when you expect something, when it's supposed to happen, what's the deadline, so they can fit it into their schedule also. So that's where communication is very important. Accountability. So going back to the questions, again, just be paying attention to, that sheet that I sent. What is the current state of your accountability? How can it be improved? And what do we gain from the change? So accountability can come in a lot of different forms. You have to think about what that means to you. And again, what would be in the benefit of the organization, of your team, and also for yourself. The other thing is, how do you hold members of your team accountable? Now, being a supervisor or manager, this is not always fun, because that means sometimes having candid conversations, and it means, talking about things that may not be comfortable, but if they're not addressed, that could just mean that an issue continues. And sometimes it's not that the person doesn't want to do something, they just may not know. And that's where I say it's really important to have that communication that's reciprocated, so that we can move forward together. The other thing is, what issues have you run into regarding accountability? So an example, a directive was given and it just never happened. So how can that be improved? How can that be changed? Just sit back and think about how often accountability isn't taking place and what are the effects of that. So let's talk about performance measurement. I don't think that people really think about this enough. Is what we're doing actually working? And I don't mean just checking with the NPR report, with what the POP report is. There should be benchmarks in place or steps that you're looking at to make sure that you're on track to get that better performance, to get that enrollment that you're looking for. And, making sure that what you're putting in place is giving you the results that you want. So things that you can use, benchmarks, surveys, reports, qualitative and quantitative information. What things you shouldn't be using? Unvalidated opinions. Someone said something, so I think I'm going to go with that because I like this person more than the other person. Probably not a good way to check to see, if this is working or not. Hearsay. Well, that person said it and then told me, and so I'm telling you. We definitely don't want to go with that either. Guessing without calculations or considerations, and generalizations. So these are things that you don't want to use in communication. You want stuff to back up why you made a decision, why that even makes sense. You have some evidence of something in measuring things. So let's get into the second half of this. And we have about 20 minutes left. So objective 2, get beyond understanding data from conceptualization to the actualization of meeting your goals. But before we go into the second half, does anyone have any questions?
Hi, Elena. No questions yet, except for one that I received privately. And the question was, in using the templates, in your experience, what has been the success rate in changing performance?
So it's not so much changing the performance, it's that you have a way to organize your data. And we're going to go into how that evolves from that template to getting to where you need to be in the second half. So if you still aren't clear after the second part, I'm more than happy to come back to that question. This is phase 1. That first part where we showed we're at the beginning of the bridge, that's all phase 1. That's knowing your mission, identifying data sources, organizing data, analyzing data, drawing conclusions, establish your goal, and creating benchmarks. That should be the minimum that you do. The next thing is communicating the data. So we talked a lot about communication. What form is it being shared in? We gave some examples of, generally NPR, maybe a POP report, simplifying and modifying in maybe a graph so that it's more understandable. How do you know it's getting to the people it needs to get to? So we talked about that. One-way communication, reciprocated communication. And how do you, think about, is what I'm trying to communicate, 1, getting to that person, and 2, are they understanding it? The other thing, what action or outcome are you expecting with sharing the data? The next thing is action implementation, and that goes along with having the timeline, that goes along with setting things into motion. You now have a plan to follow because you created that at the very beginning of this whole thing. The next thing is accountability. So not only putting the action into place, but ensuring people are actually taking the action. So who is in charge of each duty or responsibility? That's really important because sometimes we say, well, the director's responsible for everything. Well, no, the director might be the person, relaying information, but who on the team is specifically responsible for specific areas or things being completed? What happens when someone drops the ball? So that's something you should think about because it could be very costly. Phase 5, measuring success and making improvement. So what are your performance benchmarks? That should be established during phase 1. How are you measuring improvement? So you have the benchmarks, but how are you how are you ensuring that you're following up with the benchmarks and you're making adjustments as you go? Also, what are you taking corrective action regularly? So again, not waiting till the end of the year and getting your final report from teams that shows, oh, we yet again didn't meet enrollment. What are you doing regularly throughout the process to make those adjustments? Are you meeting with your team? Are you talking about not just, hey, the obvious, we didn't meet performance again. No, why aren't we meeting performance? The why will help you to understand what you need to address and how are you then addressing that. So, there's a lot when it comes to data analysis. So let's look at what this looks like in real time or what you can expect. So in phase 1, you're pulling a report. Generally, I'm using the POP report as an example, and there's two ways of pulling the POP report. You have the summary report, and then you also have the report extract. So at a minimum, you should know what the columns mean because in Teams, there's a button that you can push and it gives you an explanation of what each of these columns show. So you're pulling this information and then you're going to put it in the template. And this is where the template fits in here. So the template isn't going to get you your results. The template is part of the process to help you get the results. So you're going to take this information, you're going to take what you need from it because there's a lot of information here. And then you're going to organize it some more. So you may take this information from the template, which could be done every month or weekly, however you want to do it. And then maybe you're putting it into a main database or a main Excel spreadsheet where you can keep track of every month. We pulled that information with the worksheet and we put it in to our spreadsheet so that we can see what everybody's doing every month, all of our sites, and also the program as a whole. So this is where data continues to be organized. We're still on phase 1. This is where the data analysis starts to really kick in. Okay, it just puts the stuff into teams, and data analysis extracts the stuff and organizes it.
Elena, so we do have a request if you can go back 2 slides. And this is from Dr. Purdue. I believe it's for the POP report. Is this what you were asking for, Dr. Purdue? And then I do see that Nelda is asking for a copy of the template, and those were sent out to you in the PD portal email registration confirmation that you received this morning. So the 2 documents, both the reflection exercise and the template, will be in the PD, should be in that email. We also have a question from Ms. Ross saying, what % of adult behaviors were changed in the employees you supervise? And did you see an increase in team's performance or communicating skills?
Whoa, that's a heavy question. Oh, could you repeat it? I mean, what was the first question?
Yes, ma'am. What % of adult behaviors were changed in the employees you supervised?
So it depends on the person I supervised. And it also depends on how I communicated with them. Because with anyone, or like anyone, I wasn't always a supervisor, I wasn't always a manager. I had to learn these things. And I also had to learn how I communicated. I'm a very direct communicator. I'm very to the point. And I understand that not everybody is receptive of that way of communicating. So I had to learn to ask more questions. I had to learn to observe more before I jumped to a conclusion. So the more that I improved on myself, I saw better results with other people. I couldn't give you an exact percentage, but as far as performance in programs, I would say at least 80% of the programs that I've worked with have made improvement. And you could speak to people in the field that I've worked with and they could testify to that. I've worked with several programs on TAPS and CAPS and performance issues in general. I've had people get off of TAPS in less than a year. So the communication for myself, I think that is best, is definitely transparency and also having an understanding of where someone else is coming from. Getting a better understanding of what are the issues that that individual or that organization is having to deal with. I think sometimes, yes, there are things that are true, and yes, this is a difficulty, but I always feel like there's always a workaround. There's always a solution, and I like to feel like that's one of my strengths, is that I can see multiple ways of things and of doing things that maybe being in the middle of something, it's hard to see. So as far as a percentage of how the people improve, I can't be specific about that. What was the next question, Liz?
Well, the next question was about measuring performance, which you answered by way of observation. But there is another question by Courtney, and she says that issue is one that she has as well. I am also a direct communicator that is not always received well, especially as a woman. Do you have any suggestions about how to improve that, meaning improving my direct communication?
Mm-hmm. So listening is always important. And I think most people already have the solution. So I think sometimes when we come across as thinking we have the solution and we're always putting it out there, people feel like we're not taking their opinion into account. I'm also a very type A personality at times where I just want to get something done, and too much information for me can be overwhelming. So I understand that some people do need the opportunity to speak and maybe get some frustrations out of the way. So I've tried to be better at the relationship part of it as opposed to just work. And I think that's helped me when people know that you care and you have their best interest at heart. And that takes time. Like, people aren't going to know that when they first meet you. You have to build rapport with people. Sometimes it's difficult, especially in my position, when you have to get work done and you have to get results. But I think in time and being consistent and taking people's pending into consideration, I think those things are very helpful.
Perfect. And that's all we have for now. Thank you.
Okay, so we're almost through this process. So again, this template is only part of the process. It's not your one and be all solution. There's much more to the organization, and here data analysis is going to continue to organize your information so that you can see where you're at every month, where your sites are at every month, maybe it's your classrooms, and you're gauging your performance regularly, not when you get an NPR report, because the NPR report is, you're going to be a month to a month and a half behind in your data. And I know that it was a hard transition when we went from table 4 and all of that to the POP report, because it took some time, but we do have the POP report now, and you can have a general idea of where you need to be without it having to go through our vetting process with Department of Operational Insight. So after that, so this is for your overall program. You may want to then do it by site. So the site would have monthly targets or even a classroom, and you could provide a graph to your instructor, to your field supervisor, to your field coordinator. So whatever they're responsible for, they can actually see specifically what's going on with enrollment, whatever they're charged to meet performance with. They can see exactly where they need to be, as opposed to giving a POP report, which has so much information and you can get so lost in it, to keep them on path and keep them clear. Remember that airplane, and they're giving them specific instruction and direction. It's not muddled with a bunch of, I'm not gonna say useless information, because it's not, but you have to know what you're using the information for. So that's phase 1. Phase 2. So this is part of the communication. You're going to communicate the data. You're going to put it in a form. Maybe it's a report where you put that graph, and everything that only the instructor needs to know is there. It's not everybody else's information. It's not, their other instructors' information. It's just their information, so that they can, stay on track. Phase 3, following that timeline with the communication, from data analysis to communication to taking the action to monitoring the progress. Accountability, again, I want you to remember that you cannot hold anyone accountable for what they don't know. And the only way they're going to know is if you've given them clear information. So give an example. You hire someone and there's no job description. Okay, well, how can you hold them accountable? That's very difficult. Or if you don't give them an evaluation regularly, it's very difficult to hold them accountable. Or you're not setting goals, very difficult to hold anyone accountable. So, know your role, make it clear by giving good leadership, but also helping people to know their roles so that they know what they need to do to help with the success of the team. Accountability goes hand in hand with compliance. So this is all the monitoring stuff too, but I want you to know it's not just monitoring. Monitoring is the file stuff, the data stuff. We want to evaluate program performance, and that includes, getting feedback, doing surveys, understanding what your students are saying, understanding what your instructors are saying. So there's a lot more to the success of a program than just monitoring and compliance. Measuring success and improvements, asking yourself, how are you evaluating whether your strategy or plan of action is working? When are you evaluating? How often? How soon do you take corrective action when something is not working? And what will it cost if you do not make changes if something is not working? It could cost you your grant in some cases. What you can change can make all the difference. So again, just a reminder, your current state, your goal attainment, what's in the middle of that, the gap. So what's missing and necessary to help you bridge the gap between goal attainment and where you are now. That's everything that we talked about. And that's all I have at this time. Does anybody have any questions? So basically, oh, go ahead.
We do have a question from Courtney. It says, do you find that providing the summary of information as well as the full report helps the understanding, since some need more information, or does it cause more confusion?
So offering the full report is good if they know how to read it. So I wouldn't just give someone a report. I would go, do a training or something, have a meeting so that they're getting used to it also. And you're also asking them to go into teams and understand the information also. That way, when you're talking to them, it's not such a disconnect. right? If someone doesn't go into Teams and is not seeing things regularly, like for example, an instructor, they have read-only access, they can at least see, who's ready to exit, who's, ready to test, who got tested and their information was entered into Teams. Did they make a gain? So helping them to use the tools is very important too. You don't want to, it's like giving someone a car and saying, okay, yeah, go for a drive. Same thing with the POP report. You don't want to just hand it to them and expect that they're going to understand it. So I wouldn't just give it to them. I say it would be beneficial. They can also pull the POP report on their own, which is even better. So, you pulling the POP report for them, I mean, if you can show them how to pull the POP report for themselves for their class, that's far more empowering. And they don't even need to print it. They just need to, have it and be able to analyze it. So the more important part is knowing how to interpret the information. Any other questions?
There are just lots of great comments about your presentation. Well done, very helpful. Thank you. Courtney asks, teach a man to fish, LOL. Lots of thank yous. Thank you for the useful information. Thank you from Paris Junior College. Thank you for the great information. Excellent presentation. Just lots of great accolades. Janine says, I like giving information. I like giving everyone the information in small bites so that it can be digested. Mr. Garza says, thank you. Can we get presentation slides to pull out info for our use in presenting to more staff?
Oh yeah, most definitely. TCAL is going to be in charge of all of that, right? Or do you need, or I could send it to you, it doesn't matter.
Yes, we could post it in the PD portal so you can access that. So thank you for the presentation. Great job. Thank you. Thank you for all the great information. And then it says, will we receive an email confirmation for our participation? You will receive a certificate of completion that will be posted in the PD portal. Give us a little bit of time so that we could process the attendance. We had about 109 participants at our peak today. So if you could give us a little bit of time, and you'll see that in your email and in the PD portal. Ms. Gonzalez says, thank you. Awesome presentation. Your direct style reminds me of Dr. Brene Brown's book, Dare to Lead, on having difficult conversations. Thank you in all caps. Catalina Cerqueño says, the slide on phases is very good. Thank you for the book suggestion, Maria. Love the phases slide. So a lot of popularity on the phases slides. Question from Dr. Purdue. Do colleges have one person to enter data and one person to analyze the data, or is this in combination?
Often it's in combination. If a minimum they have data entry people, it also depends on the size of the program and their budget. So there's a lot of factors involved depending on, but at a minimum they have data entry people.
Okay, and I do see that we are at the 1 o'clock hour. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but before you log off, I want to ensure everyone receives PD credit and attendance. There is someone calling in by a 1817 number. We do need your name and program name so that we can give you the appropriate credit. So this is, again, we do have someone calling in from a 1817 number. We need your name, please. You can go ahead and unmute yourself. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Hello, can you hear us?
Yes, yes, this is Logan Swords.
Logan Swords?
Correct. It's ending in 3780 is my phone number.
Yes, sir.
And I...
what program are you from?
Fort Worth ISD.
Okay.
Adult.
And your spelling of your name is Logan?
It's Henry Swords. Thank you.
Henry Swords. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, sir.
Yes,
Thank you
ma'am.
for joining us today. And before we sign off, I'm checking to see if we have any other questions. No other questions, just lots of thanks. And before we sign off, I do want to thank those my colleagues from TCAL, Ms. Ponder, Dr. Olga Escamilla, Tracy that was on earlier, as well as our TWC family, Lori Slayton and Savino, and of course, Elena Madrid. This would not have been possible without you. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for doing this presentation today. Lots of great feedback, a lot of great interest, so thank you so much. We will hang around for about maybe 2 minutes to answer any questions someone might have, and then we'll be closing the room shortly. Thank you, Elena.
Okay, I'm still here if there's any questions.
Yes. So we're just going to pause for a little bit.
Liz, this is Beth. I'm going to have to jump off because I got to get on another meeting, okay?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Okay, and I do not see any questions from anyone else, so I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. And
Hello.
then, oh, I hear someone speaking. Does someone?
I'm Beatrice Edwards. I was trying to find my question. First, good morning. I think you did a good job. I had a question regarding that MPR and the POP reports. Are
Yes.
those reports found in Teams?
So the POP report it's if you go into reports and then participants
Okay,
and then period of participation.
okay,
That'll be available to you. The NPR report is something that comes through our agency and is only made available to the grant recipient. So
okay,
they can choose to share it or not.
okay. It would be good information though. All right. I think you did a fabulous job. I look forward to the next one and hope you guys stay safe.
Thank you, ma'am. Have a great day.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. And I don't have any questions in the chat. So I think we're safe to say that we can go ahead and close the room and then you and I can speak privately. Elena?
Great. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for today.